Good evening, everybody. A lot of a lot of crazy things have happened in the last hour. For starters, um, for anyone involved in American politics or happens to live in America, you would know. Um, Former President Donald Trump just suffered an assassination attempt, but that's besides the point of this video. Today's video is about Plato's apology, and the apology is probably one of the more iconic of Plato's dialogues. It's pretty much centered around the defense of Socrates, one of the four dialogues, and which correlate to the final days of Socrates. This dialogue in particular is an account of Socrates' trial at Athens for the charges of impiety, promoting his false gods, and brainwashing the youth at Athens. In my opinion, this might be one of the more historically accurate dialogues of Plato here, and it is very well that we are witnessing a historical moment by Plato's account here. Of course, he only covers Socrates' words in here, but that is pretty much all we need here. So, anyways, in my opinion, might be one of the more historically accurate dialogues, as I said. Um, he doesn't necessarily cover the commotion around the courtroom, like I said, but he does a magnificent job at displaying Socrates' defense, which is what we're really here for. And similar to the YouTube Pro, it's gonna have it's gonna be centered around a subject. In this case, it will be justice and duty, as Socrates is unjustly convicted of his charges, even though he is guilty as found. His case was still handled poorly. And in my opinion, the significance of this dialogue isn't the injustice committed against Socrates. In fact, the controversy of this revolves around Athens, a city praised for its intellectualism and liberty. The decision for the execution of Socrates is perhaps one of the few to put the legacy of Athens in question. However, I do not believe Socrates was entirely innocent of his charges. He is indeed guilty of failing to acknowledge the gods of his city and introducing gods of his own. Yet it cannot be said that his silver tongue wasn't a factor, as you will see. So, moving on, that was just a brief introduction, like I like to do. And this is pretty much me going to be discussing the premise of Socrates' defense here. So, the defense of Socrates is one of the most beautifully spoken speeches. Like any defendant, Socrates is attempting to mitigate against those accusing him and handling his case. In my opinion, he doesn't necessarily do a great job at defending himself from the charges, and it most likely wasn't his intention, since it would be impossible to fix his image and convince the jury of his innocence in such short time. The masses were already against him, so he had he had little say in what he could do to fix his image in such a short amount of time. And it's shown in his speech when he addresses his accusers in the courtroom because he's cross examining them. And in a way, he's kind of mocking them, which is it's pretty hilarious. Keep in mind, Socrates was around his late 70s as he gave this apology. Also, it's not necessarily apology because in the Greek word, apology is mainly just making your defense. So he's not necessarily apologizing to his accusers. Keep that in mind. Um, But anyways, Socrates is already in his late 70s, early 70s or so. He has lived quite a long life, and he has no interest in trying to defend himself. Like he's not gonna run away from the justice, and if this is what justice decides to do, he will take his punishment. Because even if he is being done wrong, at the end of the day, the people doing him the most wrong will just hurt themselves by doing the wrong. Of the many charges against Socrates, Socrates first addresses how he is an evildoer and and he makes the weakest argument seem like the stronger argument, and his doctrines being taught to others. He asserts that these accusations are false and they have piled up over the years. Like, he mentions Aristophanes' play about him, which is pretty much a play just mocking Socrates, really. Pretty hilarious play. You should read it. Um, and he speaks in a manner in which he was accustomed to because he did not have like a um, defense lawyer to speak for him. So he spoke in the conversational manner like you would to any person you come across. And others present would warn the judges about this because they did not want the judges falling for Socrates' tricks, as he is known for making the weak argument seem like the strong argument, according to them. And this is really just the Socratic method here. And Socrates shrugs this off by saying he was no rhetorician, and he simply spoke in a way that is direct and honest. And he correlates his charges to being involved with this hobby. He considered it his duty to question those who claim themselves to be wise men and to expose their false wisdom as ignorance. This is evident in dialogues such as the Protagoras, Gorgias, and the Meno to some extent. This hobby has earned him the admiration of the youth at Athens, but the hatred and anger of his opponents had he he has earned a lot of animosity and hatred over the years because of his constant propping and his way of humiliating his opponents. So he proceeds to use his methods to cross-examine Meletus, one of the primary people responsible for bringing him to trial. And in this cross-examination, um, Socrates doesn't really come to the eventual truth like he is displayed in the other Platonic dialogues. Instead, he is just really just irritating his accuser. And further into his speech, Socrates claims what he does is actually a great service to his state, as he makes an analogy of a gadfly, which he is the gadfly, in which the gadfly goes around stinging a lazy horse, the lazy horse in this instance being Athens. The lazy horse in this instance um, just keeps getting pestered and pestered by the gadfly. And Socrates says he does this as a service to keep the state drifting into a deep sleep. Even though his methods are irritating to some, it is through his influence that Athens is awakened to productive and virtuous action. And by this, he means that he's really doing something um, to empower the youth in Athens to make them better. Because Socrates' circle was revolved around young people, and that is probably him just addressing the accusation of him corrupting the youth of Athens. Socrates takes small jabs as he is found guilty, and if they are giving him what he deserves, he should be honored with a great meal for being such a great service to his city. Like, him saying this is just really just trying to just irritate everybody, to be honest. So when the judges gave him the opportunity to pick for his punishment, he declines the punishment of imprisonment or exile. Most people would have took exile back then because it's better than being locked up, but you would at least be free. And instead, Socrates is like, well, I guess I'll take a fine. And this probably has to do because Socrates was well acquainted with the rich people or wealthy people of Athens, who most likely would have paid his fine out of love for their comrade, teacher, or just a good person. The jury declined this option, and furious at the suggestion of such um, what do you call it? Such a mild punishment, he gives him the death sentence. And stoically, Socrates accepts it. He does not fear death, as only the gods know what happens after death. Addressing his jury, Socrates states, how silencing their critic rather than listening to him leads to them, Athens in this case, harming themselves more than they can ever harm him. And that is essentially the entire premise of the apology here. And right now, I just would want to like discuss Plato's narrative in this. So, in my opinion, I feel like the way Socrates is presented is he's presented as a martyr, and essentially, essentially Plato's narrative here seems to display basically Socrates was martyred by the Athenian justice system and his accusers. He was a unique individual and original. Since then, there hasn't been anybody like him. The man fit to ignorantly follow the customs and normality of society. He just wasn't fit for that. Because he was a curious man and questioned the world around him. It was his philosophy that substantially led to his death, the beliefs of a man of little significance, in which had managed to bring the aristocrats of his city to his heel. There was no man able to hold a candle to Socrates, let that be known, as neither could match him. Um, man, my words. But anyways, as neither could outmatch the man in thought and in intellect. In the end, his influence was so great he gave birth to many critics, which would continue his Western rational philosophical tradition, in which he is responsible for finding and often credited for. There is no philosopher after Socrates in which isn't well acquainted with such a titan, as he is held in high regard for his contribution to the Western thought. And my final thoughts on this: if there's anybody out there who wants to like just get one fragment from this entire dialogue, pursue the truth and virtue, as this was Socrates' primary focus in his discussions, as he wanted to reach the consensual truth. You must question everything to reach a consensual truth, so you may acquire the wisdom and knowledge you seek. And important, and most importantly, of Socratic philosophy, admit what you don't know, so you may acquire that knowledge or wisdom of what it is you don't know. And that is how we will close this episode. Thank you.